So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for making your way into the webinar in an orderly fashion. We're going to get going as soon as we've just waited a couple of minutes to let people in, but in the meantime, feel free to say hi to us in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from. And yeah, once we've got a couple of minutes on the clock and a few people in their seats, then we'll start going. Straight away, we've got Robert calling in from California. Morning, Robert. Good to see you. Couple from Washington, DC as well. Nice. If you pass the AVIXA head office, then do wave. They're in Fairfax, Virginia, kind of nearby. Someone calling from Scranton, Philadelphia, home of one of the best sitcoms ever. Ontario, New Jersey. Sergio from Mexico City, colleague of mine. Hello. Rose from San Antonio, Texas. Wow. Got some pretty good numbers already. So we'll give it another minute, and then we'll get going. I'll introduce you to our panel today. Really excited for this one. Someone from Kuwait. Wow. Someone from Hartford, Connecticut, Kansas City, North Carolina. Very nice. Okay. Yeah, we've got a great attendance already. So I'm going to start. My name's Ben. I'm the regional manager for AVIXA UK and Ireland, and gives me great pleasure today to welcome you to this, the third webinar in the new Learning Tech Managers Power Hour series. And this one is focusing on improving the online learning experience. If you missed any of the previous webinars in this series, or indeed any that you saw advertised, you can go to avixa.org/webinars and you can have a look at previous webinars that we've done, see the recordings there. If you are viewing this webinar live, then you do get RUs for it. But if you're viewing a recorded version of the webinar, you don't get the RUs for that. So just bear that in mind. However, obviously the information is still just as useful. So feel free to share that information with colleagues who might not be able to attend as well. Before I ask our panel to introduce themselves to you, there are a couple of other things I just wanted to mention. One of them is that the InfoComm 2021 dates, which are going to be at the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando. So the conference in total is from the 23rd to the 29th of October, with the exhibits running from the 27th to the 29th of October. And also mark your calendar for the next one of these webinars in this series, which is on the 24th of May. Same time, same place. So we look forward to seeing you on that one. You will get RU credit for this, for viewing this webinar live. Do allow 5 to 7 business days for it to appear in your transcript. And if you have any issues with it, please email webinars@avixa.org. Yeah, they'll be able to help you if you run into any problems. We do have a chat box as well as a Q&A box. So with the chat, we're going to be posting links in there for things that I'm going to be talking about, as well as contact details for our panel members here. But we do also have a Q&A box down there. So if you would like to ask a question of the panel, then please make sure you put it in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat, because the chat can get busy and we can miss things, and we don't want to miss any of the questions you're asking. So all questions in the Q&A box if you would. And then finally, we have our Level Up webinar series commencing tomorrow at 11 a.m. UK time. This one's going to be a great series. It's 6 weeks, 1 webinar per week, and the sponsors for this one are AMX Harman, Sharp, NEC, Crestron, Barco, Geneva, and also the AVIXA Standards Department are going to be dropping by to do a session there. So if you'd like to have a look at those webinars in more detail and sign up, then again, the address is avixa.org/level-up, all one word. So head over there and see if there's anything that takes your fancy. And if there is, I'll see you for the first one tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. UK time. So that was a mouthful, but that's all from me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves to you. So we're going to start off with Lisa Stevens.
Thank you, Ben. I am the Assistant Dean for Online Learning at the University of Buffalo, our School of Engineering, but I wear 2 hats because I am also a Senior Strategist for Academic Innovation at our SUNY system. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. And next up, Per Moritzen.
Yes, I love how you pronounce my name. Per Mortensen from the University of Aalborg in Denmark. I'm a technology manager here. I've been here for 18 years at this university, designing classrooms, both the physical but also the digital classrooms we have. We have been doing distance learning for much more than 10 years. We have great experience in that, both good and bad, which we might share some of today. And I'm placed in the IT department at our university, but also have part of my time in our digital learning design department, where they design the digital learning also.
Thank you very much indeed, and we'll talk later about my pronunciation, although I won't make that mistake again. Next up, we have a returning veteran, Justin Rexing.
Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm Justin Rexing from Western Kentucky University. I work in the AV department within IT, and I also own a integration and consulting business, Rexing Consulting Group. So looking forward to the conversations.
Thank you very much indeed. Another returning vet here, we have Jim Smith.
Hey there, I'm Jim Smith. I'm the Director of Technical and Application Development at a technology company in Connecticut. We do enabling technology for video conferencing. I've been involved in video conferencing since, PictureTel time in 1990. And onward from there through Polycom and so forth, taught classes about room design, classroom design as it relates to conferencing. So this should be fun.
Thank you very much indeed. And last, but by no means least, the new kid on the block, the one and only, David Aman.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, I'm David, and I'm based at the University of Cambridge. I'm an audiovisual and multimedia specialist there, and I'm actually based within the business school, Judge Business School, as it's called at Cambridge. I've held a few different roles now in the university since joining about 15 years ago. And in my current role, I'm responsible for the delivery of AV services, and that includes AV systems integrated in teaching spaces, associated unified comms and media production.
Thank you very much indeed. So without further ado, we're going to get going with our conversation. And what I'd like to do first, actually, is I'll come to you, Per. It's I know you and Justin as well actually had both been doing virtual teaching at your respective universities for a while before the pandemic hit. So I'd like to ask you if you could explain, first of all, just a little bit about the setup you have, and then also whether that's made it easier to sort of transition to pretty much 100% virtual teaching environment due to COVID. And Justin, feel free to jump in and share your similarities too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, it did make some of the things easier. What we have been doing is, like Justin's university has in Western Kentucky, we have different campuses, and we have doing distance learning between those. So we have designed classrooms for teaching from maybe Aalborg to Copenhagen or to other places. So that's what we have been doing for more than 10 years in that way. And some of our experience there has been that we should not, as technology managers, only look at the technology, but we should also get in the teachers, the pedagogics. So we have had great success in doing what I call a driver license for the teachers. How should they plan the teaching? How should they not react? I know, Lisa, you have been working in broadcast, and some of those things we have taken in and saying, how do we make a film, for example? You don't talk for 2 hours because then people fall asleep. So those things we have had great experience with, and those we also used when the COVID hit, because then we said, well, we have some experience from there. Now we send the teachers home. We use Zoom or Teams or whatever platform they want to use. And some of the experience we have from the teaching we had online before, we put into that. And then we have a department here at Aalborg University that the teachers can ask for help when they want to do digital teaching. So we connected with them quite fast in the beginning and say, well, we need to make some designs, some packets for the teachers to help them. What should they do and what should they definitely not do in that sense? And that make the transition from physical teaching to online teaching less difficult, I would say. It's not a difficult task. And still we had a lot of teachers that it was difficult to get them online, but we needed to put a lot of resources in helping them because there was no way around.
Yeah, for sure. Is that with a similar situation for you, Justin, at Kentucky?
Yeah, it's somewhat similar. We're kind of going through a possible identity crisis right now. We, before COVID hit, we were, doing the online only version of teaching, right? Where you don't go anywhere. It's all, recorded type videos and that kind of thing. And then we have the room-to-room stuff, which resulted in some teachers understood what online teaching was and some didn't, right? And so there is a complete split there where some loved to teach from their couch and some hated it. And some classes were better for it and some weren't. And what we've experienced is that we are trying to figure out what's going to be happening in the future. There's been messages sent that we're going to be 100% in person this fall. And there's a big push for that. But at the same time, I'm looking at the Zoom dashboard and I'm seeing students log into these classes when they're supposed to be in the rooms. So they're starting to figure out, hey, I don't need to travel to the room. I can just learn on my couch. But I don't know where this policy is going to land, right? And for myself as an AV designer, it's almost a reaction for what's going to happen. So we're trying to prepare the classrooms the best we can, but due to our budget model and how funding's allocated, it's kind of hard to forecast some of those things. So, again, the summary there is we're going to see what happens coming up this fall. Is it 100% in person? Or are students going to dictate the demand and supply of these classes and how they ingest some of this stuff? And what I've been hearing, students want to take online courses if it's Math 100 or Biology 100, but they do want to be in person if it's a nursing lab in, hands-on type of learning activity. So the answer is it depends. We'll see where it goes.
For sure. Lisa, I noticed you unmuted your microphone, and was that in anticipation of? Did you have something to add there, or was that just a coincidence?
I was thinking about the challenge of describing the difference between academic continuity, continuing to provide access to education regardless of the COVID circumstance, versus what we've all come to understand as true online learning, which requires a fair amount of foresight and designing the curriculum to be delivered online. I was smiling a bit when Per was describing his experience, because it was taking me back to my dissertation days when, just trying to describe to people how to interconnect with different types of networks and the different bandwidths. And Jim mentioned earlier the picture tell days. I'm like, oh my goodness, I remember those. We've come a long, long way. But that doesn't change the pedagogy. You still need to design with learning objectives in mind. And as I think it was Jim who said earlier, you can't talk for 45 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. I know I'm going to come to you, David, because Cambridge has traditionally always been about the in-person experience, right? It's sort of known for that. So how challenging was it to adapt to the virtual model, and what have been the most sort of important lessons that you and your team have learned when it comes to improving the online learning experience?
I think the pandemic kicked in, so quickly for us. Back in, well, it was March or maybe even February, actually, sort of thinking back to ISE and sort of returning from ISE way back in February 2020, and it feels like a long time ago now. We got back and we're already starting to feel the hit of the pandemic, with travel restrictions coming into place, and we were finding that we were, particularly say for residential programs, needing to put an online offering in for that teaching. That quickly ramped up to a point where all teaching was pushed online because the lockdown in the UK kicked in towards the end of March. And in fact, the week before that, we had a number of residential programs that were going to be featuring students traveling from all over, which still needed to go ahead. So we made the decision with about 48 hours notice that they needed to be flipped fully online. It was a challenge, but it was something that we saw coming, so it wasn't a huge surprise. We'd brought in extra equipment ready. We'd got hire companies on standby for extra screens and things that we needed to make that happen. So we were doing teaching from faculty on site, doing live online teaching to our remote students. The main thing all along, I think, has been about engagement. That's been the biggest challenge, to maintain engagement with the remote audience, with the remote students, and to really keep them focused and give them as far as possible that kind of in-person experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, yeah, Per and Justin, you've been doing this for a long time with the online. Was there a point at which you started it and you needed to kind of overcome those challenges? And was there a strategy that you employed in order to try and entice people and get them more comfortable with being online, or was it a quick transition?
So it really depended on the situation at WKU. I know, again, we're very reactive, and something that we've actually talked about on our AV Super Friends podcast is, and what we're hearing at Western Kentucky University as well is, do teachers have to teach to the least common denominator? Meaning, do they have to focus their entire plan to teach to the remote student versus the in-person student? And this is something that we brought up, in our discussions on this practice. At what point will that dictate we don't need screens in the classrooms? If your whole pedagogy and everything is teaching to the furthest remote student, and you've got to come up with one course plan, how does that change AV design in classrooms? And what should we be looking towards the future in AV design? And what does this mean, right? And that there's also other one-offs. Well, sign language, how do you teach that remotely? We hear about audio is the most important. Depends. We have a big sign language program. And so we have to kind of keep those people in mind to, I don't know, give an equal opportunity learning environment, if you will, if that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, when Lisa was talking about room design, some of the aspects for that remote participant, when you're in a classroom, an instructor will tend to look at people and engage them in almost a personal sense. When there are remote participants, sometimes people forget that there has to be some sort of engagement to the remote participant, and doing things that seem to not make a difference because we're not at the remote end, but where the camera is located to the screen or the material that's being presented, so that it maintains a sense of eye contact. Without eye contact, people don't tend to feel like they're engaged.
Yeah.
And there's lots of little things that can get in the way of making that remote classroom functional. People tripping over the technology. Nobody wants to be embarrassed, and I can't imagine an instructor wanting or feeling like they're embarrassed in front of their classroom because the technology got in the way. And that's a real thing to be concerned about.
My biggest challenge through all of this has been relearning how instructors are going to try to teach, right? And what we found is it's easy to throw cameras and microphones in rooms. I mean, we all do that, but it's doing it effectively and doing it in the right classrooms in their right quantities. And we as AV designers in my role have to understand how these instructors want to use our technology. That's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge isn't deploying technology. I mean, that's what we do every day. So that's really where we need to ramp up our understanding of what instructors and students want.
I think terminology is another interesting point, isn't it? We kind of discussed this in the briefing last week. We're talking a lot about hybrid at Cambridge at the moment. But what does that really mean? For us, we're using the term hybrid as meaning people in the class at the same time as people remote. Roomy zoomy is another term I've heard for it, which I quite like. But being told, oh, can you make those classrooms hybrid, make those lecture theatres hybrid? What does it really mean? And as you said, Justin, what does that teaching look like? What does it involve? What are we going to do to actually maintain or even improve the engagement with the remote students in particular?
Yeah, we found that COVID really hasn't changed our technology deployment. It's changed how we communicate with people internally to figure out how to deploy those technology solutions. We're bridging gaps between, I'm looking at people, I'm able to work with our e-learning department. Somebody chatted in on that. That's something I learned. Who are these people? Why do we need to know what they're teaching these teachers and engage them? And there's a lot of departments or a lot of universities that, where AV and the e-learning people have combined departments. And that seems sometimes more efficient depending on your culture at the university. So that's the biggest change I'm seeing is communication channels and avenues getting just deployed out of nowhere, if you will.
We've definitely done a lot more. Per, go ahead.
Okay,
sorry, I cut you off before.
Yeah. What we have done in all this with the video distance learning, we started out in inviting all the teachers in and asking them, what is it that you would like to do? And exactly, yeah. And it was something completely different than what we as the technology managers thought they wanted to do. So we came up with a design that was quite simple. So they come into they can come into a room, they can press a button, and the system is up and running. It's very simple, and I would say it's not fancy looking, the design we have done, but it's working, and it's working 98% of the time. And before we did that, and all the classrooms with video conference we have are equal, no matter where you go. So they know what they can do, but it's not flexible. And I would say 5-10% of our teachers would like the flexibility, but then we can give them something else, and then we have a system that's up and running. But this of talking with the teachers, asking them what would you like to do, and figuring out that they need something simple. I talked with some the other day and say we were discussing how can we keep on teaching from home. What do you want to do? And I was, or what do you need? And I was talking with them on having interactive screens at home and so on. They said, no, we don't need that. We just need a flip over and a good camera. It's simple and it's working each time. So sometimes I think we have to be careful, not thinking about the new technology, but how can we make it simple, what we have for them also. And another thing, we should also look into how are they teaching, because most of what we are thinking of is that they will just stand up and do a lecture. But why not combine it a bit with some flipped classroom, make some videos that students can see, and then inviting them into a Zoom room or team room and having a discussion, because as Jim was saying, that it's difficult to keep an interaction with them. And if you prepare them beforehand, read articles, watch some videos, and then inviting them in smaller groups to have an interaction, maybe not a 2-hour lecture, but 25 or 30 minutes. That could be something else I think we have to look into in the future.
Yeah, for sure. We've had a question come in actually, which I think we might as well address now, because it's something that we're discussing. I think it could add something good to the conversation and give each of you to give your perspective. Unfortunately, the questions asked by an anonymous attendee, but so I can't give you any credit. But within 12 months of reaching and meeting via Zoom, users will have become very accustomed to hearing voices through microphones positioned in close proximity to the mouth. When users return on campus to existing installations that may have ceiling mic arrays, for example, no amount of DSP can recreate the effect of a microphone close to the mouth, and I expect many users are going to be underwhelmed by the quality of such environments. How do we manage these expectations, and how will AV designs need to adapt for small collaborative rooms, for example? So I'm sure you all have your own opinions on that from different perspectives. Please feel free to jump in and give your thoughts on that one. And thank you to the question asker.
Something I quite like there, actually, maybe a slightly different take on it, is I think that one thing that's happened with the use of technology and online collaboration over the last year is suddenly people, probably to a more personal level, have discovered the importance of technology and good use of it and good practice. And I think that's something that some people perhaps didn't have quite so much appreciation of in the in-person teaching environment. So things like close miking and kind of sorting out your audio at home and lighting and that sort of thing. Suddenly people have had to work that out for themselves and realize the importance of that. So I think that helps with another level of appreciation when returning to the in-person environment.
This is a bear because the last room I designed had a nice crown microphone, one for every 2 students. And even with that, it's going back to an auto mixer. And an auto mixer is, depending on the gating and all the settings, it's never going to sound really, really terrific. And ceiling mics, you're always going to hear that hollow sort of feel to it. And the biggest challenge with a high flex class is making sure the students seated in the classroom can interact extemporaneously with the students at a remote site. So I'm just now, I can't pretend to know much about it, but I'm interested in learning more about the Dante protocol and being able to get more microphones across a network. And be able to leverage better mixing, better quality of sound. I just don't see how we can do it otherwise, unless you get that microphone right up by the student and don't require them to push a button or to hand a mic to someone. I mean, it has to be very natural for it to work pedagogically.
Yeah, if we're talking about microphones and audio quality in rooms, you can spend $10 million on the microphones. If your room has an RT60 of 10 seconds, there's no learning going on. So,
exactly.
You know, I'm a big infrastructure guy. When we deploy Zoom rooms and conferencing applications on our campus, the first thing I look at is acoustics. And there's classrooms on our campus that were hard to teach in before COVID, before the microphone issues. They're small rooms, they're just open ceilings, concrete, and block walls. And so there's a lot of discussion about how do we create a better learning environment first, because you can't solve everything with technology. Yeah. That's just the bottom line. Yeah. So that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, one of the things about room acoustics is it can, when managed properly, you can end up using fewer microphones for all the people in the room. There's this thing called critical distance, which is when the room reverberance overwhelms the sound of interest or the people talking. And you manage that with mechanical treatment. You cannot manage it electronically. And Justin's right. You have to take care of these things. And if you don't get a chance to take care of them, people don't like it aesthetically, or they feel it's an unnecessary expense. We've never needed to do anything like that in this room before, so why do we have to do it now?
Yeah.
The nice thing is that a room properly set up for remote participants actually sounds better inside the room.
Yeah. And I think as AV designers, it's our duty and our role to help educate our colleagues around us. I just, had a meeting a couple of weeks ago where faculty wanted to put a microphone in a classroom. You walk in, like, no, you don't. You don't want to put a microphone in. Why not? You explain the acoustics, like, do you have a better room? And we got to an end result, and that person now knows what to look for and has a base understanding of what acoustics are and how they can affect learning, not even online, just in person.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to just touch on one thing just before we move on to another point, because there's this idea, and like David mentioned earlier, there's this idea that now that the whole sort of virtual teaching, kind of online learning thing has come to us, and very quickly, we haven't made a gradual move into it because of the pandemic. We've had to learn on our feet very quickly and kind of rush into it. All these kind of terms have come up. So, hybrid teaching, blended, flipped classroom, all this kind of stuff. These are terms that need to be defined, obviously, but what I want to know is what your guys' thoughts are on where we're actually going with it, if you have a favored term, one that you think makes most sense, and where we're going with it, because obviously AV and instructional designers, the departments are combining, and I think we'd all agree that we sort of need each other's help in many ways to sort of understand what's going on. So just want to get your guys' thoughts on that situation.
Well, yeah. So the answer, yes, Ben. There's a lot of definitions, and they mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I don't know if we need to hire Webster's dictionary to help us define some of this stuff, but somebody out there needs to create a standard list of terminology for these rooms. And really, when people ask me, we want a hybrid room, we want a flipped classroom, my response is, what are you trying to do? It reacts into a conversation, then we get the answer. So I don't really have a good answer for that, Ben.
That was actually one of the foundation things we discussed with flexspace.org, was how can we get these three key stakeholder groups, you know, your audio video folks, and IT, faculty, and all the pedagogy folks, and the designers and architects. How do you get everybody using the same term to describe the same thing? It was a challenge to come up with a taxonomy that everybody could settle on.
Yeah, I think you just kind of have to cut the jargon as much as possible, and just, you know, talk in real terms, just as you've both said, and literally just describe what's been doing, because there's so many terms bandied about. They're not accurately describing for anyone really what's trying to be achieved.
Yeah, and I think the important thing as well there that I sort of picked out of that is, as is always the case in most lines of work, is asking questions. You know, as Justin said, if somebody comes to him and says, I want a hybrid classroom, I want a flipped classroom, I want this, I want that, go back to basics, ask them what are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? Because then it completely takes all the mystery and all the confusion out of the terms that people are using, because people might be using terms which they're completely unfamiliar with and have misunderstood, and then you end up trying to design something for them that they didn't even want. So I think that's another thing that I hope you'd all agree is a good piece of advice when designing things and these spaces and trying to create solutions, is ask the person, okay, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to get at?
Yep, that's the two most important rules I have leaving a design meeting, is making sure I 100% understand what the client needs, and making sure when I go back and I write my scope of work and put together the project that they know what they're buying. Just because I understand it doesn't mean everybody does, right? So those are challenging things to work on as designers, because again, we're all good with electronics. We can all put microphones in places and capture audio, but to create a nice scope of work and make sure everybody is on the same page, that's the real goal.
I was going to say, it's just like the sort of AVIXA project management cycle. It's got to start off with a needs analysis, hasn't it?
Yes.
Exactly. Well done.
Gonna keep
well
it on
done,
message,
David.
Ben.
Yeah. I know we've obviously spoken a lot about the sort of the learning environment and talking about the transition from classroom to virtual because of the COVID pandemic and everything. But what I'd like to also speak about is just the classroom in general. So Jim, I know we were chatting in another conversation that we had about sort of like teething problems and stuff like that, because obviously once the system is designed and developed, we will inevitably encounter real world teething problems. Just wondering if you have any thoughts or advice, and the rest of the panel too, on how we can sort of avoid or minimize these issues as much as possible.
Well, paying attention and addressing things as they come up. Justin was talking about understanding the intent of the customer before proceeding into a design exercise. Someone else had mentioned understanding how the instructor wants to teach, how they intend to use the technology. But then you get into a space and, okay, we've installed an auto tracking camera, and the auto tracking camera will follow the instructor around as they migrate and through their discussion. And there happens to be some mannequin in the corner. It's perhaps a physiology lab. And the mannequin in the corner keeps popping into the video whenever the instructor stops speaking. And why is that? That's because the technology is looking for people presence in the room, and it doesn't understand that there's a difference between a live person talking and a mannequin. So it'll always include the mannequin in the shot without anyone talking.
Yep.
So we've got to address things like that. We've got to make sure that people pay attention to these details and take care of things as they come up and not let it become a habit. You know, some in K through 12, especially, there was a tendency for folks to use whatever microphone happened to be in their laptop computer and whatever speaker happened to be in their laptop computer, whether they were an instructor or a student. And the end result was students would fall out of engagement. I can't understand what the teacher's saying. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to go play Minecraft or whatever they can do on their lockdown computer from school. But if someone took a recording of that class and played it back to the instructor would see perhaps that they were unintelligible for a great deal of the conversation, and the students were gradually becoming disengaged, and not letting things like that fester. Taking care of the details, following up, asking the question, how's this working for you? Well, it's not so good. I can't understand what they're saying. Well, I wonder why. Let's figure out the problem.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We've had a couple requests for, camera tracking and, questions like, are you sure? Is that really what you want? Some of the problems with camera tracking, if you have two cameras in the room, if somebody asks a quick question, hey, could you repeat that? And that's it. How long does it take for the front camera to switch and then switch back? And it's almost a distraction now. So, there's a lot of technologies out there. Instructor says, I want this. Are you sure? And then trying to figure out how to describe how that works in the classroom is very difficult. And that's where, again, I'm trying to get better at myself, is making sure people know what they're buying.
Some of the things we have had good experience with here is that demonstrating it to the teachers, especially the one with the microphone. We have our distance learning room has a wireless microphone. And I put the teachers in another room and I make a teaching session to them by video conference. Then I turn it off. So we use the microphone with the video conference system in the ceiling. It works. And then I turn my microphone on and off while I'm talking with them, and they can really hear the difference. And when I do that and then go back to them and say, well, then imagine the cheap microphone you have in your laptop compared to a good headset. It's the same, but more, it is a higher difference in the quality. That convinces them quite fast, instead of me trying to explain it to them, because then they think, well, Pierre just want to sell them something else or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're building some example classrooms to buy new technology to test and trying to figure out how to get some of those faculty champions in to use it, to see how they use it. Just because I use it doesn't mean I'm using it the way they would, right? So that's a great plan to do.
For sure. I'm going to come now and I want to ask Lisa a question, and then I think Lisa's also going to show us a little bit about this flex space concept and platform that she mentioned to us earlier. And then after that, we're going to do a bit of Q&A. So I just want to say that before I come to Lisa, if anyone has any questions for the panel, this is your opportunity. After Lisa's done her bit and we've discussed that a little bit, then we're going to come to questions. So send them in now using the Q&A box if you have them, and we'll address those in the last sort of 10 minutes of the webinar. But yeah, so Lisa, and as Per mentioned earlier as well, you worked as a broadcast engineer prior to a career shift to higher education, and now you're assistant dean at a prominent school of engineering and applied sciences at the University of Buffalo. How did this career path shape your interest in what became flex space, and particularly in light of the challenges and issues that we've already discussed?
Anyone that's had the good fortune to go out on remote production has enjoyed the sensation of a team coming together with nothing other than a pile of equipment and assembling all of that equipment and then having the production come off, hopefully a good production, and then packing everything up and having it go away. And it's a great sense of working together and coming together and having a good show, if you will. I carried that right into my experience with teaching and learning. I know a number of us on this panel have done some teaching, and nobody likes to feel like an idiot when they're fumbling with buttons and technology when you're in front of students and or anyone else for that matter. So my story is I had a good opportunity to work with some leadership within our entire SUNY system. The State University of New York is a 64 campus system. And our SUNY level provost said, you know, we're spending millions and millions of dollars building and renovating these learning classrooms. And now we're looking at flexible furniture and people being able to do teamwork. And I'm just not convinced we have the right people sitting around the room having these conversations before we go and order all this equipment and architects and the like. And so isn't there some way we can share pictures with each other? So out of that effort, back in, somewhere around 2013, hopefully you're all seeing what is a landing page we created within the SUNY system, and a number of other systems hopped on, most notably California State University and Penn State and Foothill De Anza. At any rate, we created the Flexible Learning Environments Exchange. Keyword being exchange. We never thought that people were going to hear flexible as the keyword, but here you can come to the main website and go through a number of filters on top. You can come down and actually listen to a video at flexspace.org that describes what FlexSpace is all about. And when you go to hit this login, it will ask you some basic demographic information to set up a free account. Now, the key to all of this is it's by educators for educators. So if you have a .edu address or an equivalent from Europe or somewhere else around the country, we're happy to let you in. If you are a vendor, then we'll need to talk about it, because this is a trusted environment for teachers to come in and pretty much, you know, share information about what it is they're trying to ideate. So the concept here, you can come across and explore all the menus. But if you come to the main landing page, these are all exemplars that people like us have uploaded. You can see we have the esports arena here. People have loaded up exemplars of their classroom. And if I click on any of these, here, I'll just click on, I don't know what this is. I haven't looked at this in advance, so that's always dangerous. You can come up and you can actually indicate up here, you can click that you like the space. You can create an idea board. Yeah, you get the idea here. But Antonio put this space up, gave a description of what the room is about, sort of details at a glance. And then you can click on any of these and see a bigger picture of what's in the room. And then as you upload a space, you are asked to tag what's actually in the room vis-a-vis all of the different technology. We tried to stay away from brands intentionally. We didn't know globally whether brands held true all across the globe, but you can come in separately and tag brands. And there's probably 100 of them in there. But you get the idea. It's sort of at a glance, you can come in and take a look, filter by the type of classroom that you might be interested in, like so. We've got idea boards, all sorts of different ways to look. But the concept at the end of the day was, I'm interested in this. How can I find what some of my peers have done?
That's absolutely fantastic, and it was a pleasure to see as well. Straight away, I could spot a lecture theatre that I've actually personally been in, the Loughborough UK campus. I'm sure David's probably been in there as well. No, that's absolutely brilliant. Do the rest of you here on the panel have you seen this space? Have you used it? Do you have feedback about it and your own experiences?
I can add something to that. I have been looking at it to get some inspiration on how to design classrooms, because we tend to go in our small little bubble, and then we see some presentations from some vendors, and we like that. But it's nice to broaden that out to see what are other people doing around the world. So I have gotten some quite good ideas from there as well. Also to see if I have an idea, I'm going to design a classroom like this. I try to find the same classroom there, and to see how have they equipped it, and how is that looking. And sometimes you can get a contact name there, and you can contact the person and talk with them, how are their experience there also. So it's not just getting inspired, it's also you can get contact with people, and then you can share some information, and maybe you can save some time and have some good experiences as well from that.
Yeah. And something that I brought up before, it's hard to communicate what those expectations are. So you can use FlexSpace as a tool, and it's more for, you put something like that in front of your faculty, and faculty say, that's what I wanted. It's almost like, how my wife uses Pinterest. She calls a contractor. It's like, give me that. I want it to look like that. Like, yeah, I got it. Everything's well communicated. So it's a good tool to have.
When the COVID pandemic hit, it was so cool to see people from all over the world start to send in their ideas for social distancing and how they were calculating how to, do different room layouts. And Penn State generously provided some research they did about what type of mask, can an instructor use. So we have a toolkit in there that we're probably going to eventually call it something else, but you can upload an idea and share it with everyone. Or if you're working with a group of advisors on campus, you can give everyone an account, tell them to go look for examples through the lens of their own expertise. I was sharing with you guys earlier, it's fun to watch the English teacher talk to the engineer, and this magic happens where they say, oh, you're doing that with your students? I want to try that with mine, even when they're from two totally different disciplines. So it's a great way to ideate. And to Justin's point about Pinterest, my partner in crime on the West Coast, Rebecca Frazee, cringes every time I say this, but it is Pinterest on steroids for the AV community.
Yeah, that's what it reminds me of. It's a great tool. It's not a knock.
And you can, once you create an account, you can set up your own private idea board. So we could all get together and collaborate on an idea board and bring in different examples and start a conversation around just that idea board. It doesn't have to be published and open to the community.
Exactly.
Sorry, you got me started.
Absolutely, no, it's wonderful. As we were saying earlier as well, I think it was Jim especially was saying, the passion that you have about it is just it's absolutely wonderful, and that's what we need in the in our in our jobs and in our lives and everything. So it's no, thank you very much indeed for bringing that to the group, and for giving us a quick run through of it as well. And I believe Carla has my colleague in the background running everything has put the link to that in the chat there. So anyone on the call, feel free to click through to that link, and also explore the website, and if you have any questions, there are links to all of the panelists here to their LinkedIn profiles. So contact them through there and continue the conversation. That would be fantastic. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and a couple of questions come in. So I'm just going to read them out, and then if you each just want to give your thoughts, if you have any, and then that should bring us towards the close of the webinar. So if there is anyone out there still with a question, we're getting to the last 10 minutes now. So chuck it in, and if we have chance, we'll answer that for you now. So the first question that's come in is anyone looking at what to do with high capacity lecture halls and auditoriums post-pandemic, specifically rooms of 150 capacity or more, The concern is they might not compete well against a fully online course covering the same content. What are your
Yes,
thoughts?
we have done some thoughts, and I have some pictures I'm around at the university to present to our teachers, and it's a bit mixed what they think. So I have seen two companies promoting a system. It's a lot of screens bent around, so it's like a television studio. So you're standing there as a teacher, and then you have the students up on the screens, and when the students on the left screen is asking a question, your audio is coming from there, and the teacher turns over there and talk with them, and the camera sitting over there is actually filming the teacher, so it's looking like he's having eye contact with the students. So we are thinking maybe in that direction, and as a tool. Because we are hoping, of course, to get all the students back. So that could be one thing, and another thing could be having online videos, just recorded some small lectures, and then having the students, 150 students, divided into smaller groups, and then having discussions either by what we're doing, Zoom or Teams or whatever. So something mixed of those two technologies are what we are considering.
We have a strong belief in the sort of, the face-to-face experience as we spoke about kind of the beginning of the session. So I think for us, there'll be a lot of maintaining that. And I think our plan probably is once the pandemic is over, we would just like to carry on using those large spaces and filling them with students and letting our students have the in-person experience, have the interaction, have the engagement between them, the opportunities for what those conversations actually bring about. Is very different, I think, the in-person environment than it is online and remote.
Yeah, we have I guess a little bit different approach maybe. I don't really know how it's going to play out with our large auditoriums for the standard classes, but we've been actually doing a lot of projects recently to help support event recordings within those rooms. We use those rooms for a lot of different things at night and weekends and film studies and all kinds of stuff. So we're seeing a lot of new requests for, let's get the audio for all the mics in the Zoom or Teams or whatever, which is usually super easy since there's a DSP right there with a USB port on it, just some reconfiguration, no big deal. But the video part's been interesting. They seem to not want to spend the money on the camera, but let's put in the cabling and infrastructure. So because the AV team on the support side are the ones that go out and record these events. So instead of having us run cabling all over the floor and set things up, now we can do it with one person. If there's SDI cabling in the walls, we just hook up an SDI cable. Oh, it's ingested in this computer over here for Zoom, and they man that camera. So we're seeing a lot more of those type of requests, but we'll see what the standard class instruction will. I don't know what that's going to look like in those large auditoriums yet.
I think one of the really welcome side effects with the pandemic has been what you were alluding to earlier about communication and everybody feeling a little bit more like they're on a team, because we had to get everybody together quickly to say, okay, how are we going to?
Yeah, you didn't have a choice, did you? You had to do it, whether you liked them or not. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah.
And that has thankfully carried through to some nice teamwork across a number of units. And, that's where I learned about this Dante protocol. And that's where we're learning about some of the new large screen display capabilities, like you were just describing. And oh boy.
If you like Dante, check out SRT.
Okay.
It's like Dante on the video side of things, if you will. So there's going to be some big changes coming through with NDI, SRT, and already Dante being out there. It's going to change how we deploy audio and video and how we communicate through classrooms and everything else.
Well, we just don't have time to core floors right now, or to get.
Yeah.
I noticed a comment earlier about a product that Sennheiser has with ceiling microphones. To look into that. I've heard some good things about some different products out there.
Oh, I've changed my design approach on cameras completely. It's way faster to deploy a PoE plus camera with SDI outputs than it is to deploy one with local power, because I can't hire a electrician fast enough.
For sure.
You know, so if we already have network there. I'm in the IT team. That project is now all internal. So not only are we alleviating cost, it's much quicker to deploy.
The flip side of that, though, is that now you've got the possibility of overwhelming your network. You've got to really pay attention to those aspects of the facilities design. Any of the network camera protocols, some of them trying to send uncompressed video down the network, and if you just don't have the capacity, it starts affecting everything.
Yeah, you gotta understand what your network is and how it works before you start deploying all this stuff.
Right, and then that's something that people will probably find out the hard way the first time they attempt it.
Which is where the friction comes between AV and IT departments, I think, when they're trying to work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we should have just enough time for this final question. Again, it comes in from an anonymous attendee saying, once students come back to physical classrooms, how important do you think web conferencing would be compared to webcasting, like live streaming with chat? Will teachers be able to interact both with online and the physical students as they do today when teaching is fully online?
Completely is what I would say. You know, with what we're doing at Cambridge, we're equipping our rooms now for, you know, kind of the long to medium term, and saying that the online component of teaching, I think we feel is here to stay. And it isn't just about the broadcast. It is about actually connecting in live two-way with those remote students and making them part of the in-person experience. I think that's something that's going to be here to stay.
Yeah, and kind of, you know, piggybacking on what David said here, we're not going to decide this. The students are going to decide this via supply and demand.
Yeah.
And if students want to take classes anytime they want, and they want to take classes from their couch, then we got to figure out how to deliver that as, you know, institutions. So, you know, we'll see.
The lag time with the enterprise solutions, you know, the chat back with streaming, like Panopto or some of these other recorded things, it's like lecture recording. So it's great for that, but I think we're going to keep using Zoom or WebEx or some of those other web conferencing tools just to have that live interaction. I think some of our non-traditional students, particularly working, you know, in master's level courses, engineering courses, want access to the instructor in real time. So
Yeah, that's a big concern. That again, we don't realize it when we're at the source end. We only realize it when we're at the destination end. The lag time that's present in a typical webcast versus a interactive conference. The 200 milliseconds or so each direction in an interactive environment, a real video conference, compared to as much as 20 seconds in a webcast. And you do lose that immediacy. You do lose the context of where does this question relate to what I was just talking about, and how do I pull all that together? That puts a huge burden on the instructor, and it makes it difficult to have a mixed environment. If you've got people local, their interaction is pretty immediate. If people are remote and it's not conferencing, then the interaction is stilted at best, and can cause all sorts of problems in maintaining the flow.
Yeah.
We really feel that remote interaction can't be done without some sort of local facilitator within the classroom.
a faculty friend of mine calls that person's role the Google jockey.
I like it.
Yeah. Looking up questions or monitoring questions coming in from afar. Just have to make it a little bit easier on the instructor. It's already rough enough, you know.
I like the little animals next to the cameras.
As wonky as it sounds, we actually have faculty that like those little fuzzy animals above our confidence monitors. So
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do to improve the experience, right? That's what we're talking about. That's what we're here for. That brings us perfectly to the end of the hour. That's absolutely flown by, but it's been great. Thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to come and share your thoughts with our attendees today. We've had great attendance as well, and you've captivated them all, and some great questions come in too. So thank you again. Before we go, I just want to say do a final couple of plugs. The next one of these Learning Tech Managers Power Hour webinars will be on the 24th of May, and you can find out more info about that at avixa.org/webinars. Of course, as I mentioned, the InfoComm 2021 exhibition dates at the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando. The conference is the 23rd to the 29th of October, with exhibits on the 27th to the 29th. And then the Level Up Conference, the online 6-week online webinar series starting tomorrow, 11 a.m. UK time. You can see information there for avixa.org/levelup, and you get 1 RU per webinar that you attend. So if that's something you're interested in, and if it fits in with your schedule, please do go and have a look. But that's it from us. So I just want to say a big thank you again to everyone, to Justin, to Lisa, to Per, to David, and to Jim, and thank you again to all of our attendees as well for attending, for supporting the webinar, and for asking some great questions. And I hope you got the answers you were after. All of the panelists' contact information via LinkedIn can be found in the chat. So if you have any further questions for them, do reach out to them. I'm sure they'd love to continue the conversation. But until the next time, thank you very much indeed, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.